Lead me to some soul today. Oh, teach me, Lord, just what to
Welcome, everyone,
say.
to episode number 75. I know I've said this several times, but I can't believe 75 episodes that we've done. But this series of episodes is called Leading Others to Christ. And during these episodes, we're going to be focused on evangelism. And I've said this several times. This was my COVID project. And we wanted to find out who are the ones that are out there that are involved in leading others to Christ, involved in evangelism. Who are they? Where are they? How are they doing their work? We wanted to interview men, women, couples, preachers, elders, deacons, members of the congregations, and find out, as I said, how they are doing the things that they're doing, how they're reaching their family and friends, people in the community, with the gospel of Christ. And this has just been so exciting. And we've just got a lot of things that have come out of this, but more about that later. My name is Dan Barker, and I work with the Vestavia. I have to get used to saying this. I work with the Vestavia Church of Christ, suburb of Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm working here as one of the evangelists, focusing on doing the very things that we're going to be talking about today. And those of you that know me, you know that I'm passionate about this subject. And I have been ever since I obeyed the gospel when I was 21 years old in Owensboro, Kentucky. And ever since then, and this, obviously I'm not making this up, but I've been just passionate about learning how to teach others. And I've made so many mistakes. And when I first started, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. But learning how to teach others, to use some phrases that I've used every time, to sow the seed, to be a fisher for men and women, and to teach others how to do that as well, to make disciples, to persuade men and women to teach others. And I've always referred to this passage in 2 Timothy 2:2, where Paul there talking to Timothy. You'll remember he said, "In the things that you've heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men," obviously to faithful men and women, "who will be able to teach others also." And then later in that chapter, and I've always been motivated by this, where Paul tells Timothy to be useful for the master. Just think about that. How many of us would see ourselves as being useful for the master today? But he said, useful for the master, prepared for every good work. So this is part of the reason why we came up with the idea to do this. And, we're so excited today to have with us I guess we ought to get people a jersey or a number or something to wear. We have with us today Shane Millard. Hey, Shane.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome. We're excited. We've had a chance to visit just a little bit on the phone leading up to this, and we're so excited to have you with us today. And Shane works with the North Hickson Church of Christ there in Chattanooga area, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But Shane, let's start out. You've heard some of these episodes, what we do. I've called it the elevator pitch or the short bio. And tell everybody that doesn't know Shane, just a few things like where you were born, the story maybe about when you became a Christian, and kind of bring us up to speed, if you would.
So I'm from East Texas originally, and I'm in the sticks of East Texas, the piney woods of Nacogdoches. And so I was raised by Christians. I attended a church, actually, that if somebody knows a church in that area, they're probably familiar with it. It was the Mountain Star Church that is now the Stallings Drive Church. And so I had the great privilege of being raised by Christians, had grandparents and so on. But I became a Christian. I was initially baptized at 12. Also, thought about that and was baptized again later. But then I started preaching at 16. It was kind of a funny thing. I did my first invitation, and then there was a son of a preacher that had been, a member there and everything. And he came up and was like, "Hey, have you ever thought about preaching?" And I kind of stumbled into preaching. I didn't have the call or anything like that, but I was asked to go and preach at this little bitty congregation, like less than 10 people, that kind of thing. Very, very small. And I ended up doing my first sermon, and I had more sermons done than I had done invitations in just a short period of time. So, but that kind of opened up the whole world of preaching for me. And so basically, it's kind of like you get a reputation. Once you can preach in one place, in East Texas, there's a lot of little small churches around. And so I got asked at all sorts of different churches around there to fill in and do all that kind of thing. But eventually I ended up working with a church and training there, the Loop 287 church there in Lufkin with Brady Cook. We talked a little bit about that earlier. And then I had a short break in between. I was working with another church. After that, I kind of started working with them. And then I had a short period where I wasn't preaching because I was engaged. And so I wasn't doing that. But then I ended up getting back into preaching in 2013. And I've been doing that full time, like located in the actual place ever since. So that's kind of the short. Preached in East Texas and then ended up over here in Chattanooga. And I've been here about 4.5 years. So.
4.5 years. So what's the just a thought? What's we say this a lot in the interview because we've interviewed people obviously all over the country: New York, Florida, Georgia, California, Washington, Canada, and just real quick, the difference in the work because of the community that you're in, the environment, Texas compared to Tennessee. What would be one thing that comes to mind?
Well, they both say y'all, so they're pretty similar. There's a lot of similarities. Just, I don't know if it's culturally, just from this area compared to where I'm from. But I guess the difference here compared to East Texas is there's not really a lot of churches here compared to how it was in East Texas. And so maybe that's just a Chattanooga sort of thing. But that's been one of the biggest adjustments for me is, I don't know, it just seemed like there was more people that I was connected with and relationships and that kind of thing. But I guess that's one of the biggest things for me is just it's a little bit different in that way.
Okay. Well, it's that's come up in some of the interviews. Like if we were think about Chattanooga compared to Harlan, New York, or Chattanooga compared to, I mean, it's just that's just a big part of, and when we move into different communities, that's one of the challenges, and that's what we're going through right now is learning our way around and learning names and learning. Now, where we are right here, I mean, there's congregations all over the place,
Sure.
And so that's again different from what we had there in the area in Indiana. But
I'll say one thing on that, Dan, is this is the biggest church I've ever worked with, where I'm the evangelist, and it's also the biggest town that I've ever lived in. So the little town I grew up in was like 30,000 or so. And
yes.
then the church I was with before, the town was only like 8,500 people. Like it was really small. And coming here, it was just a change in pace. And it's there's so many people in the church, but so many people in the community. It's definitely been an adjustment period for me to just kind of acclimate myself.
Sure. No, I understand. I think most that are listening would understand that too. Since we're on that, kind of on the cusp of it, tell us a little bit about North Hickson. Tell us a little bit about the congregation.
So the church here is just over about 100 or so. And I actually work with another guy here, Byron Nash. And so he joined us about a year and a half ago. And it's a real encouraging group. They're supportive of me. They put their hand to the work. They're real generous and that kind of thing. And it's been a real positive thing for us. But it's a pretty good mix of ages, but there's a pretty good bit around my age. So a lot of like 30s to early 40s with young kids and that sort of thing. So that's been that's been good for me because I have 4 kids, and it's also been a very different experience for me because a lot of the churches I had worked with before, that wasn't necessarily the makeup of those churches. So it's definitely just a different situation.
You mentioned this. You mentioned 4 kids. What's your wife's name?
Elena.
Lena. Uh, you maybe have heard me do this on a couple of podcasts. That way we can give Alina a shout out here. How does she help you in your work as an evangelist?
Oh, uh, all sorts of things. So I have the opportunity sometimes to go to like Puerto Rico or other places, and she holds it down at home. And
Yes.
then if I am going out for a class or study or something like that, she's taking care of the kids. And for me, one of the most important things for our relationship, I don't know if every preacher does this, but I talk about the Bible with my wife like all the time. And so if I'm studying through a concept or have an idea or I have a question, even this morning, I was kind of just, kind of dumping some things that I was thinking about on her and just kind of, hey, what do you think about this? Or here's how I feel about it. I do all that kind of thing. I do that all the time. And she's just my best friend. It's great to have her. If I didn't have her, it would, I don't know where I'd be.
Well, we haven't done that as much as we should have with every episode, but trying to do it more and more because and I know I wear my wife gay. I wear her out talking to her because a lot of times she's the only audience I have, and and she says I'm getting worse as I'm getting older. Keep telling stories, but that is what it is. But I think it's great too that your kids get to see that how mom and dad talk and how mom and dad work together, and that's a great. You're teaching without even realizing what you're doing there of even those interactions, and so give her a shout out for us, okay? Tell her we.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, okay, great. Um, I know one of the things, and I wanted to give it as much time as we could. You shared something with me I thought was fascinating of your interest in the Hispanic community, and I want us to give us that time because I think as such, there's people out there that are listening to us that this might be the one thing that they take away from this, and it might motivate them. I didn't mean that's the way it sounded, but this it might motivate them to do what you've done, but it may not be in Spanish. It might be in other languages where they've got connections or whatever. But so tell everybody about the about why you're so involved and interested in the Hispanic community.
Yeah, so I guess part of it is that growing up in East Texas, actually my hometown has a pretty big influence of the Hispanic population. So the first restaurant I worked in, a lot of the ladies there, they spoke Spanish. And then one of the jobs I had as well, the guy that taught me, one of them, he was bilingual. And so it was not an unusual thing for me to be around that. But I kind of, started and stopped and never really learned. And then I never had like a Spanish class in high school or anything like that. But it was something that, you kind of always had the idea. I love to learn this idea, or I love to learn this language. It'd be cool to have it, And anyway, so years later, I had a friend of mine that actually is now living in Puerto Rico, Caleb Westbrook. I was getting to where I was wanting to mature, to increase my skills, to grow in those ways. So I was thinking maybe I should get my master's, or maybe I should do something in original languages. And I was talking with him, and he's like, you should learn Spanish, and for multiple reasons. One is obviously you're going to be able to teach more people, and there's actually a really big need in the Hispanic community. Like you see you can't see it on the podcast, but all of these books here, it's hard to get resources like this in Spanish. They're just not, it's not in the same categories, right? And then it was going to be cheaper, obviously. And it was also just really more practical. There's so many opportunities where I look back over the years of trying to work on it. if I had not put in the time and energy and effort to learn Spanish, I just basically wouldn't have that relationship. It wouldn't be there. And because I've done that, it really has opened a new world to me of opportunities. Like, just one example, if I hadn't learned Spanish, I would not be teaching a class to some people in Guatemala right now, or teaching and studying with them. It just wouldn't be there. And so that's one of the ways that for me, I have improved myself, but it's also been kind of a door, because even if you don't speak Spanish very well, it's like, Dan, you've probably been to another country where, English is not the first language and you're just kind of trying to stumble through and have conversations. But when somebody comes up, if you're in a crowd and you can't understand any of the language, but when someone comes up and says, "Hey, Dan, how are you? We're so glad you're here," they speak your native language, even if it's in a broken, the accent's not that great or whatever. You can just, you just feel different. You feel a connection with that person that is really, really hard to define and understand until you experience it. Right. And so anyway, that's at least some of the short of it. I'm sure you got some more thoughts on that.
No, I just think it's just the fact that you were motivated enough to learn, to take the time and the energy. And I think there's a lot of things like that we, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking for myself, but we procrastinate, or we think, well, I can't do that. I'm too old. I'm too this. I'm too whatever. But when you look around, like we talked about the other day, talking about the Hispanic community, looking at numbers, and remember we were talking about things that looking at 10 years ago, and those numbers obviously in all areas have gone up considerably. And there's just a lot of people in our communities, wherever we might be, that if we aren't equipped to do that, who's going to be able to teach those folks? And or another way would be if you have somebody that's in the congregation that does speak Spanish, where you could partner up with them, go to studies and take them with you, where they in essence become the interpreter. Or there's just lots of things that can be done. You don't have to go to Guatemala or Puerto Rico, right? Oh, sure. They're just around the corner and down the street. And I just find that fascinating. So I would encourage you to keep, how old are you?
So I'm 36.
Yeah. See, by the time you're my age, I'm sorry, but you'll be really good. You'll be really good. No, I just think that's fascinating. And you're right. There's an attachment there that people feel that you're making that effort to learn, and they appreciate that. They appreciate the fact that and you're serious about it. So that gives you more credibility as you're talking to them and they're listening to you. So I just think that's great.
Sure.
We have go ahead.
And I'm not the first person to do this kind of thing. I mean, there's a lot of people as you look through it, but it is sort of a kind of a fringe kind of thing. But now there's so many resources. There's so many things that are available. People, and that we just, we tell ourselves a lot of lies, Dan. And one of those is, I can't learn another language. That's just it's a lie. And we can. It doesn't come easy. It's definitely a lot of effort. But I mean, I was 30 years old when I decided to kind of get after it. And I had friends and resources and all sorts of things that have helped it come along. But there's one guy that I appreciate on a lot of different things, but he said, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing poorly at the beginning. And that's how it's true in evangelism. It's true with all sorts of things. And it's true for languages too.
No, I think that's exactly right. So we need to give ourselves more credit and look for people in the community that even in our congregations, there's in a lot of places, there's talent there, and people have just never thought about how they could be involved. That they've got that background where maybe you meet somebody that's from France, and you've got somebody in the congregation that can speak French and can help make some connections. And who else do they know? One person leads to another. So that kind of leads to what we have been calling the conversion story. Is there a story that you could share with us that comes to mind when you think about your work as an evangelist?
So thankfully, the Lord has put me in places where I've been able to teach and help other people. But as I've grown as an evangelist, I've realized the most important stories are the ones where I wasn't as involved as much. And what I mean by that is, I'll tell you this story. So there was a young lady, her name, I won't say her name, she might get embarrassed or something, but she was coming with one of our members at the time and was listening to me preach, and she would come to my meetup that I was doing on during the week. And there would be times where she disagreed. She didn't like everything. But eventually, she was coming and everything like that. And so one of our members here, who is another young single lady at the time, actually a couple of them, they took this lady under their wing and they went through and taught her, befriended her, worked with her. And they started just reading the Bible together and just kind of working through various questions and that kind of thing. And then ultimately, like, they ended up breaking up and she ended up moving and that kind of thing. But right after she had moved, because she had this relationship and this connection over here with these two ladies, she became a Christian. And so she's being, faithful in the church she was there. She ended up moving to another place. She's still faithful there. And that's the kind of things for me. Those are the stories I like to hear, because it's everybody looking at the gifts they have, the relationships they have, and saying, hey, I can do something. I can be a friend. I can read the Bible with them. And because for me, just think about it practically. I'm 36. She was in her 20s. The relationship's just different. I can't be a friend to that extent. And a lot of times when it's the preacher that teaches the study, maybe the preacher's the only person at the church. And right. It just becomes kind of a strange, difficult dynamic that you have. And it's better for me to help others, to equip them to do the work instead of me doing the work for them. And it becomes part of a culture. It becomes part of everybody kind of working together.
Wow. Several things there you said that kind of hit hot buttons, but that's a great story. And I love it. We've talked about this too. You're mentioning the women there. I'm afraid in a lot of our congregations, well, it's sad to say, we've learned this through all these episodes, but in a lot of places, there's not much evangelism going on at all. And then you start looking at men that can do this. Then you start looking at women can do this. Can women be involved in evangelism? Well, yes, they can. And more women have been involved in teaching others, I think, than what we even have any idea about it. And like you say, they can develop relationships. They can have meetings and have studies where we can't, because, we're married and we're men, and just the dynamic of all of that. But there's so many women in the congregations that are, they're teachers, they've got backgrounds, they're good in relationships, and they can open doors that you and I never could. And so we're trying to do that too, to encourage the women. We're trying to encourage, you mentioned this, that the 2x2, where you and I go out and work together, or get two women to go out and work together, because we have each other's back and we can be supportive, and then just to duplicate the work, if you will, is just I think a critical part of the whole process. Yeah, you mentioned there too, relationships. We could talk a lot about that, and believe it or not, Matt just gave me the signal. We've got 5 minutes. All right, relationships. How critical are relationships in doing the Lord's work? How critical is it for us to learn how to interact with people that we don't know, even with people we know? And I'm talking out, it's obviously critical that we have relationships with other brothers and sisters. And in some places that can be a challenge, but especially when we're evangelism, when we're trying to reach out to people in the community, of learning how to do that. And I think some people are more outgoing than others, obviously. But there's things like, you learn Spanish. Well, we can learn how to build relationships. We can learn how to do that and get to know people in the community. You mentioned the meetups. Share with us what you've done. Maybe there's somebody on here that hadn't heard what a meetup is. Tell everybody what you're doing.
Yeah, so that's something that the church here did before I came, and I do a meetup on Monday almost consistently. We just work through the book of Mark right now, and that's just kind of the standard pattern. I'll just kind of work through different books and that kind of thing. It started in person, and COVID changed it to where it's online now, and now I'm kind of stuck in this like kind of in between, because I have people that come regularly that are in other places that are not here in Chattanooga. And so it's kind of like, well, should I have something in person? Should I have something online? And so anyway, we have regular visitors on that. And so that's been very good.
Well, you ever going to go back to in person?
I mean, I guess maybe. The
I
thing
know.
is, I mean, it is. There's a convenience factor to it, I think, for them and for me.
Sure.
But I also like, when you're sitting there in a coffee shop or whatever, you may have other people come up and say, "Hey, what are y'all doing?" And you can talk to people a little bit longer and that kind of thing. So,
well, I think again, that's so good. But yeah, keep doing the things that you're doing, we have this too at the end of almost every episode. We start calling it the one thing. So somebody is listening to this, and maybe you've got them fired up. Maybe they're thinking, you know what? Just say, there's a lot of Hispanics here in the area, and I even took Spanish, and I've never done anything with it, but I say this all the time. I'll look at people and I'll go, knowledge is power, right? Knowledge is power. Mm-hmm. And when I'm doing that, if you're nodding your head, I will do. It's kind of like yawning, if I'm knowledge is power, right? And they go, yeah. I go, no, it's applied knowledge. It's taking the things that you've learned and apply it. And I just always have fun doing that. But it makes people stop and think. So somebody's listening. What's one thing that you would say that they need to do or learn how to do, Shane, to be better in evangelism?
I've thought about that a lot, Dan, and it's not actually even related to Spanish, even though I think that, I would encourage people to do that kind of thing. I had a realization after years of preaching that I had never gone through and read the Bible for myself. I'm talking about read the entire thing all for myself. And if there's one thing that I would tell someone, and there's a part that kind of builds out of this, is you have got to actually sit down and read the Bible for yourself and like find a plan that has it to where it unfolds the story. It keeps the whole books together and that kind of thing. I've got a plan that's helped me a lot on that kind of thing. And as part of that, I think as you do that, you'll be able to explain the story. You'll be able to explain, various parts of it that maybe stand out to you that you want to try to teach people. But I just over and over, I just come back to we just got to read. We've got to read it. And, it seems so simple, but if you dig around and you ask, hey, have you read the Bible for yourself? Well, I've read parts of it. I've heard the preacher talk about it, but that's one thing that I would encourage people to do.
Good. No, that's excellent. So, all right, somebody wants to reach out to you. Are you willing to share your contact information?
Yeah, sure. So you can send me an email. It's just my name. It's Shane_Millard@hotmail.com. And then if you would like to, shoot me a text or give me a call or something like that, I'm on Facebook. I'm not on there all the time, but you can message me through that, or just my number is 936-615-6805.
Well, thank you for that. And, everybody's so busy, and I really do appreciate you taking the time this morning to squeeze us into your schedule and to do this, and keep doing the work that you are. And, we not to close on negative things, and this is not so much negative as it is reality, but there's a preacher shortage right now. On the average about 2 conservative congregations that are closing a month. And a lot of that is because evangelism is not being done in communities. And so that's part of what we're trying to do here is to stir people up and find people like Shane that are on fire doing this and motivate you to keep going, and you motivate us. And that's what we're supposed to keep each other stirred up, right?
Yeah, well, and I told you the reason I listened to this and actually started was because I needed to be stirred up, and even now I still like, hey, I need to do better. I need to work on this better, and so I appreciate the opportunity. I kind of feel blessed, but also kind of like, oh, should I be talking about this? But
yes, you should.
I'm thankful. I'm thankful for you inviting me.
Well, again, thank you so much, and give the brethren our best there. At church there in North Ixon, and Lord willing, we'll get to meet in person sometime.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah, that'll work. All right. Well, thanks again, brother, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Dan.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Shane.
Who pray, melt my heart and fill my life. Give me one soul today.